Okay, here's a wild idea for you. What if I told you that all the efforts to make animals suffer less could actually be leading to more animal exploitation? Yeah, it sounds completely backward, I know. But that's the pretty provocative argument we're going to unpack today, based on our source material. Let's dive in. So that's the central question, right? How on earth can that be possible? It seems like a total paradox. But according to the source we're looking at, this is exactly what's happening. These really well-intentioned efforts to reduce animal suffering are, believe it or not, accidentally strengthening the very systems they're trying to fight. So how does this actually work? Well, it's all about psychology. It's what's called the welfarism paradox. See, when the public starts to believe that an animal lived a good life or was treated humanely, it basically sanitizes the whole process. It's like a PR win for animal industries. It makes consumers feel totally fine about their choices, which allows the fundamental exploitation to just keep on trucking. Only now, everyone has a cleaner conscience about it. This is where the argument really hits home. The source uses this incredibly powerful analogy. Imagine you're the one who's been kidnapped. Sure, you'd want a comfortable bed, right? Better than a concrete floor. But you wouldn't want activists out there campaigning for humane kidnapping laws. No way. You'd want them to abolish the whole institution of kidnapping altogether. Normalizing a better version of a bad thing just guarantees that it never goes away. Here's another way to think about it that I think is really useful. Welfarism is kind of like a painkiller for society's conscience. It makes us all feel better by just masking the most obvious symptoms of animal exploitation. But by turning off those alarm bells, that little voice of guilt, it lets the underlying disease get even more dug in and spread totally silently. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. If making exploitation more comfortable is such a clear problem, why do so many people who have dedicated their entire lives to this cause keep falling into this trap? Well, our source points a finger at a really surprising culprit: the dangerously messy and ambiguous language the movement itself uses. And here is the absolute core of the problem. On one hand, you've got a word like veganism. It has a fixed definition. You can trace it right back to its founders. It's a clear, solid principle. But on the other hand, you've got animal rights. And that term, well, it has no historical anchor. It's just this vague, mushy umbrella term that can mean pretty much anything the person's saying it wants it to mean. And because it's so vague, it forces totally contradictory philosophies to all live under the same roof. You've got thinkers like Gary Francione, Peter Singer, and even the authors of the book Zoopolis, which argues that animals should be citizens, all getting lumped together as animal rights advocates. But the thing is, their worldviews are completely, fundamentally incompatible. So let's break down these clashing ideas real quick. First up, you've got deontology. The easiest way to think of this is like a moral brick wall. There's a set of hard, unbreakable rules, and you just do not cross them, ever. For an advocate like Gary Francione, the rule is simple and absolute. Animals are not property. You don't cross that wall, period. And then, on the complete opposite end, you have utilitarianism, which is famously championed by Peter Singer. This isn't a brick wall at all. It's more like a math equation. It's a calculus of suffering. An action is considered moral if it results in less overall pain in the world. There are no unbreakable rules here. It's all about the final score in the happiness versus pain calculation. So let's put them head to head. You've got Francione's super rigid, rule-based brick wall versus Singer's flexible, outcome-based math equation. One is all about the absolute right not to be property, while the other is just focused on the final tally of suffering. They're fundamentally at odds with each other, but they're both presented to the public under the exact same animal rights banner. You can see the problem, right? And this philosophical chaos, it leads to some pretty bizarre real-world conclusions. I mean, depending on which animal rights theory you subscribe to, you could argue we should actually eliminate predators, like lions, to save zebras, or that eating roadkill is totally ethical, or that we need to grant citizenship to chickens, while at the same time negotiating treaties with squirrels. It's a recipe for absolute confusion. This metaphor from the source just absolutely nails it. Activists are taking bits and pieces from these totally incompatible philosophies. A wheel from the utilitarian bicycle, an engine from the deontological tractor, a wing from somewhere else, and they're trying to build a single coherent message. And the result? A movement that looks confused and often just self-destructs before it even gets going. So, how do you get out of this mess? What's the way forward?
Well, the source proposes a really clean two-step solution. Step 1, just ditch the animal rights label that's causing all this confusion. And step 2, go back to the simple, powerful principle that started the whole vegan movement in the first place.
And here it is. The solution isn't some complex 10-point academic theory. It is a return to a simple, clear, and incredibly powerful principle. Animals are not resources for humans to use. Full stop.
Now that small change in language has massive implications. You no longer have to get bogged down in debates about the rights of dust mites or the citizenship status of deer. The whole question of who suffers more just becomes irrelevant. If the one single rule is we don't use animals as resources, then all of those complicated, convoluted arguments just, poof, they evaporate.
And the takeaway here is actually much bigger than just animal advocacy. This is a lesson for pretty much any social movement. When the core message gets all muddied and diluted, when you can't even agree on what your most important words mean, it becomes functionally impossible to agree on a solution. Clear, defined language is absolutely everything.
And that brings us right back around to our final, pretty provocative thought. If making a system of exploitation more humane simply soothes the public conscience and basically guarantees that system's survival, well, we have to ask a really tough question. At what point does harm reduction stop being a step toward progress and actually become the very tool that allows oppression to continue forever? It's a sobering thought to leave you with. Thanks for joining this explainer.